Joel, I was going to print all the accolades that you've had in a wingless, but Officeworks didn't have enough paper.
Yeah, well, I had a good run. Obviously, started, you know, I think I've been doing wingless racing for 10 years. So I guess, just through experience, you do get better. And then obviously the longer you do it, the more opportunity you give yourself to win those big races. So I think someone like, Todd Wigsell, he was the pinnacle when I started, and I still call him the GOAT of wingless racing. I don't think anyone's ever going to match what he did at the time. With the equipment he had, it wasn't like a lot better than what a lot of the good guys had. He sort of on par and just made it happen, man. His attitude to racing, he was like, don't worry about everyone else, focus on yourself. And he taught me a lot growing up, and I based my racing a lot around what he taught me, and never really did get to beat him in his prime because he was just that little bit better than me, and I think that made me a better driver. And then after he left, then my success sort of started to come. Probably thanks to him leaving, I guess.
Because you would have to be the most accomplished wingless driver in Australia.
Oh, yeah, but again, I think that comes partially through time. I think Daniel Hardigan won 2 Australian championships as well. Didn't win any WA championships, but he was going toe-to-toe with Tom Payette every year, and I think Payette just edged him out every year sort of thing. And he was awesome in a wingless as well, obviously. And then obviously there's some good guys on the East Coast as well. Probably too many to list, but I would say I wouldn't rate myself the top wingless guy because I still think Todd, and people laugh at me for saying it, but I think I couldn't beat him in his prime, and I wasn't in my prime at that time, but I think we could have had some really cool races.
I'm thinking back to him at Speedway City, and if you're saying you're not in your prime at that point, like you guys had some like killer racing anyway. Yeah,
we did, but I know Todd so well that like if it wasn't a title, he wasn't really giving it 100%. Another thing he taught me was like, when you get to the business end of the season, that's when you go back to what you know or what has worked. The rest of the season is just you're working it out, like you're trying things. That's your opportunity to, learn something new or try something different. You're not going to go out on the Oz title final and throw something at it. Like, well, if you do, you're probably getting a bit keen and you're not going to go anywhere. But so yeah, he taught me that sort of stuff, and someone I idolised and looked up to racing wise. And yeah, towards the end, we were giving him a run for his money. We started on the front row of the Oz title he won at Adelaide. We raced in the dash, and I managed to beat him in the dash. But just with his experience in the A-main, we were no good. We over-timed our car and fell back to 5th or something, so never really got to race with him for that. But he won it, and I was absolutely pumped for him, so it was good.
Yeah, it was absolutely... some of the... Like, how fast he was there, eh? Like, it probably sucks for you to talk about it to a certain degree, I suppose, but like...
No, because it sets a benchmark. Like,
yeah.
It gives you the level, and I think anyone in wingless, or anyone in any racing category for that matter, you always want something to chase. And, you can be on your home turf and do really well, and then you go into state and you sort of get your ass handed to you a bit. And then it's a bit of a reality check to say, well, I'm not that good and I've got some work to do. And I think you always need that. You always need that target to chase. Like, and for me, when I was at the top and sort of winning every week, I had to start going to, all right, look at lap times and race times and how much can I win by, because just to constantly push myself. And then we weren't probably in a financial position to go travel to Victoria every week because the competition was quite stiff over there. So we raced at Adelaide a lot, and it was just like, oh, well, let's just try and get as good as we can here and then develop our program and then sort of go out from there. And it seemed to work.
So before wingless, you came through junior sedans?
Yeah, so raced junior sedans from the age of 11 till 16, pretty much as soon as I turned 16, got out. I could have done another season in juniors, but sort of had enough. But yeah, raced a Toyota Corolla. It taught me a lot because you just don't have any adjustment. You go out on the track and you've got what you got, and you just sort of got to make it happen. We were pretty successful with that, won a state title, finished second in an Oz title as well. But
I think we still got a lap record at Murray Bridge as well.
Is there? Oh, it must be. That's surprising. No, it must be like an odd amount of laps or something, maybe 6.
I
short
think,
race.
yeah,
or
it's
something.
like 5 or something like that. Yeah,
it'd be odd amount of laps, but yeah.
So what was that, like K20?
K55,
Okay, yeah.
55? K30, 55,
Yeah.
something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Same body shape, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So it was when they were rear-wheel drive?
Yeah,
still?
real drive, real cars.
Yeah, that's... I didn't say it. You said it. Yeah, I don't know.
No, look, and, you know, and I don't take anything away from the junior drivers now because, you know, I'm way past that era, but I did used to, you know, have a hate for the front-wheel drive cars. But,
Yeah. I kind of get it based on availability.
Oh, 100%.
Well.
I think it's the only way they could go realistically. And you know what? Like some of those juniors now, particularly at the big shows, they're, you know, the kids from Queensland, Victoria particularly, the cars they're presenting, and when you see those cars show up to the track, you're like, man, these kids are serious and it's the real deal. And I think it's setting a really good foundation for them still to set them on the right path. Like, yeah, some of those lads out of Mildura and stuff, like they're just, they're serious. Like, and it's good. It's good.
So I was at Mount Gambier for the Australian Junior title, and some of the presentation and the wraps and the designs and stuff like that, I was like, there's a few guys from sprint cars that could learn a few things from the way these cars are presented, at least. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's any category. They can definitely set the benchmark. And I guess, it's, I suppose everyone takes lessons from every class, you know, like. But yeah, they set the benchmark, and it's really impressive to see.
Yeah. So did you race anything before juniors? Like any?
Nah, so I just basically just my push bike racing as a kid, like, and obviously watched Dad race, always on the hill. And then pretty much straight into juniors, and no one lets me forget it. I was very, very slow when I got on the track. Dad pulled the piss out of me a bit, and plenty of other people. I think I got lapped twice in my first heat, but slowly picked it up from there. And at the time, like Greg Redette owned everything. He was, I still call him my stepdad. He was with my mum at the time. They were running like a 2-car junior team, so his older, like one of his lads was in the other one, and sort of the equipment was more biased towards him because he's older and he was faster, so it made sense. And then once he moved on, and then sort of I had the more favourable equipment, worked on it and just got a lot better. And we worked a lot with Brian Hayden. He helped us with some car stuff and some suspension stuff. He's a bit of a guru around that, and that put us in good stead. Greg could build an awesome engine, and he won't mind me saying this, with setup stuff, just had no idea. So we were sort of, we were no good in that department, but when we worked with Brian, he was really good. And they learn a lot. They bought Chris's, I think, last junior sedan, Chris Hayden's last junior sedan off of Dane Kingshot. It was a Corolla as well, and it was bullet fast. And I think, Brian just did some tuning on it and made it even faster. And then we sort of used their technology over on our car, and they used some of our motor technology and combined to make pretty quick cars. So that was good.
I think he was the last rear drive car to win the junior title.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think the following year, I think it was Cody Morosky. Maybe there's someone in between there. But I remember in Tassie, we were right up there in the points as well. And I tipped it over in my last heat of the first night. And that sort of...
Tipped a junior over.
Yeah. And it was stupid because there's one right in the whole track. We're at Latrobe. And it was coming out of turn 4. And I don't know, I was hitting it every lap and I was in front of my heat by like half a lap. But I don't know, maybe I just thought it was working, and one lap I caught it wrong and put myself in the fence and tipped it over. And I thought it was the weekend over. It sort of like, it landed really awkwardly on the front corner of the roof and half collapsed the roof a little bit. So it was like, not good, like, it was bad. But then like my family and family friends down there, the touring family, they like busted their butts and pretty much rebuilt the car overnight. We went back the next day. I think I finished 3rd in the next heat off of the rear, and then started out of 11th in the A main. Passed like 6 cars in the first lap, and then there was an accident. Someone's bumper tore off and it punctured a hole in my tyre, so it was show over. But that happens.
Yes, unfortunately, it's just the way sometimes racing goes.
But no, it was a good, it's one of those memorable things you think back on and like what could have been. I think that's just about every race weekend though, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you're not having those sorts of thoughts, like, are you really...
Yeah.
Especially someone like, you're a racer through and through, aren't you?
Oh,
You know,
I wouldn't say now. I used to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely some guys that are out there that are probably more casual racers that are just out there for the sake of it to a degree. Whereas,
Yeah, like I think of someone like Daryl Sloan. He's like the South Australian wingless president, and he's just happy to go out there and race. I'm like, how do you do it? And then all the stuff he does off track as well. I'm like, how do you do this? Like, how do you not get worn out? And he's just like, oh, he goes, I'd be in a different position if I was, trying to be competitive like you or whatever. And he won't mind me saying that either. He's just loves it, and just that's his thing. And I don't know, maybe when I'm a bit older, I'll be a bit more like that. And I did probably go towards that way a bit in the last couple of years. After becoming a dad, racing wasn't the most important thing to me anymore. So, when I showed up to the track, it was just, try and do your thing. But you lost the hours during the week. And, there's that age-old saying, races are won in the shed.
Yeah.
And, I wasn't putting the time in. You couldn't expect to stay at the front. Like, it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Jamie Cobby was saying to me he was in California and he was running third in a race, and he was just like, "No, I'm happy with this." And he's like, he knew that was when it was time to pull the pin instead of, trying to throw the slider and go for the win.
Yeah.
If you're happy, as a true racer, if you're happy running third, well, it's probably time to...
Yeah, I've never been happy running third, that's for sure. But like, I want to win, but some nights, you just have to. It's not acceptance.
There's obviously like car setup. Sometimes the car itself, it's just not going to...
Which again, I've only got myself to blame for that. I do it myself, so...
Yeah.
It is what it is, but...
So successful through the junior, and then the decision to go wingless racing, like budget or like...
Oh, it was partially budget, but also we didn't want to go street stock racing. Like, that was never even on the radar. And at the time, there was like AM cars, which are pretty much non-existent now.
Because your old man was racing AM cars.
Yeah, he was racing AM cars, and I was like, probably don't want to go down that route either. And then there was...
How'd that go down?
Oh, no, well, because like, Dad was never really involved in my racing anyway, so he was always like, although he supported me from the sideline sort of thing, and he was like happy for me to do whatever, like, he wasn't fussed. He actually didn't want me to race at all to start with.
I could probably imagine he didn't want you in AM cars.
Well, he didn't want me to race speedway in general. Like, when I first started racing juniors, Dad's like, oh, it's a silly decision, like, you shouldn't race till you own a house sort of thing or whatever. I guess, maybe an old school mentality, I don't know. But, yeah, I don't know. We went and did it. So, but when we were also looking at modified sedans, like, to me, they're still my favourite speedway category. Yeah, right. I love them. Like, when you get those top guys out of Queensland, Victoria, they're just nuts. Like,
yeah, they're severely underrated in the Australian speedway.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, so, rate them really highly. Love them. But, again, when we come out of juniors, I think there was like 3 cars in South Australia. And I was just like, well, I'm not travelling Victoria every weekend to race. And probably worked out, it sort of just left wingless, which we had some interest in. But we knew that we were going to struggle just based on it was so far from what we'd raced before.
Yeah.
So it was like the only option financially, because we weren't going to go sprint car racing. There was never the budget for that. And then even when we went wingless racing, the car we brought to start with was not very competitive. We had to do a lot of work to bring it up to scratch. And at the time, like, both my parents, they were just on wages sort of thing. Then Greg, he took over a business, and obviously income comes with the business, and we were able to invest a bit more money in racing, and then I was able to get to the front sort of thing. So a lot of it was like I improved as a driver, but a lot of it was car as well to get to the front. And I say my driving ability was always there. It was probably my attitude that wasn't right to be competitive.
So obviously wingless was probably a hell of a lot cheaper back then compared to what it would be now.
Oh yeah, definitely. I
don't know. I've heard some massive variances in what people are spending on engines now too, though.
So I've always been lucky with engines. Like, even after, so I brought out the team from Greg pretty much 3 years ago, maybe 4. But yeah, so I pretty much brought everything from Greg, and he, even still after that though, he always built my engine. So machining, we were looked after by Advanced Engine Reconditioners anyway, because Greg builds a lot of wingless motors. So ours are sort of like, just does ours as well for pretty cheap. So with machining, sort of looked after there. And, you know, all that success we had, we didn't have the fancy sumps and rocker covers and shit. Like, people want them. You don't need them.
Yeah.
Like, so, you know, you can spend a lot of money, but you don't need it.
Yeah.
It looks cool. But it's not going to make you go faster. So, yeah, I don't know. For me, like, we could still probably put it together a motor for... it depends how far you go. Like, if you're talking extractors, everything, you're probably getting towards 10 grand. But, like, if you've already got your extractors and, you know, you're bolting on your own intake and things like that, you probably 6.5. But that's for me. Like, I don't know what Greg's charging other people, and I don't know how much that's coming.
He's going to get some Frankles now.
Yeah, probably.
No.
Yeah. But, like, I know he's still, like, Greg's, you know, he's the national tech rep. Well, I assume he still is. They've got the national conference this weekend, so who knows how that's going.
Maybe the motor come up.
Yeah, it may do.
I think me and Jack were talking about. I think it's locked in to. The motor's either locked into 2020-30 or they can rediscuss it in 2020-30.
Yeah, so, there is, I think you just touched on it as well, there is supposed to be like an engine development committee or something.
Yeah.
But, like, I get the whole point of going V8, and, like, who wouldn't froth on that? It's going to be sick. And I think that's going to be the eventual, like, it's going to be the eventual thing, right? Like, where else can you go? There's no,
Yeah.
Yeah, as Jack said as well, like, you can't go to an Ecotech V6. Like,
No, you're only progressing a couple of years.
what's the point?
Yeah. And then the Alloy Tech has, like, not lots of issues, but, you know, there's a lot of maintenance between races.
Yeah, and I just think, are you really progressing? Probably not. So,
and they probably sound worse.
Yeah, well, I like to defend wingless nowadays. Like, when I first started, they all did sound like someone was fighting in a freaking container. Like, they sounded terrible. But I would say the upper echelons, say, of wingless nowadays don't sound terrible.
Yeah.
If you, like, got the top 20 cars out on track, doesn't sound awful anymore. Obviously, you still got half the field that does, but I think, you know, just with tunes and extractors these days, people have made them sound better. And I think, obviously, you're doing it to gain performance. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. But with that motor thing, man, I'm glad I'm not part of that decision because, you know, there's a lot of noise from a group that wants to go V8 racing. But, you know, if that was the majority, I think we'd already be looking at doing that now. Like,
yeah.
You got to remember, I think wingless have like 300 cars across the country.
350 are registered currently.
Yeah, there you go. So
it's the biggest class in Speedway Australia.
Sure, street stocks aren't bigger still?
Wingless are bigger.
Yeah, right. So,
which surprised me too, because I thought there was 500 street stocks in WA alone. But
yeah, I don't know. So I think, like, you'd already be there if the majority wanted it. And, you know, personally, I'd want it, but it's easy for me to say, well, I don't have a car in the shed too. Like,
yeah,
you know, any decision that's made now doesn't affect me anywhere near as greatly as it does everyone else. And, you know, there would be people come back to the class, but I think you would lose a lot of that, you know, middle to bottom as well. Like, yeah, and, you know, going back probably 10 years ago, like when wingless first started, like for me, if it was a V8, then there's no way I would have got into it. There's no way we'd been able to afford to do it. And, you know, people talk about the engine cost and, you know, it's not that much greater than what some people are spending now and whatever, but you got to consider the running costs as well. Like, you know, we've had shows this year where we're smoking 3 right rear tyres. They're $700 a tyre. Like, that's in a V6. What are we doing with a V8?
Yeah.
We're not. The class isn't designed to be doing that. So, but the class, when it goes V8, it's going to be a completely different thing. It's going to be a whole different beast. So
yeah. So Peter Morris touched on it because obviously the big like engine that gets thrown around is the CT 525, like the purpose-built Chevy LS dirt racing motor, and he said that's fine, but you've got to leave it at a point where it's not making massive amounts of horsepower because currently they're getting like 40 nights before a rebuild.
Yeah.
So for some guys that's like 4 seasons, but the more that they're opening up what you can and can't do to them, that's going to shorten to 20 nights, and then he's like, soon enough it would be equivalent to a 410. Like, so you got to really control it.
Probably 360s failed a bit in not controlling what they did. You know, you can see what happens. Like, everyone wants to go faster. There's always that bloke that comes along that wants to spend more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how they control, like, the LS sprint cars in Victoria. I'm not sure on the
think
rules
it's through
around
the
that,
computer.
So, yeah, but yeah, what people are doing inside, I guess, I don't know if they're sealed or whatever. I haven't looked into it because it's not something I've needed to pay attention to at this stage. So yeah, but yeah, I feel for the people that's going to make that decision because no matter what they do, it's going to upset people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no there's no. It seems like the clear answer though, sort of. Like, see, for me, like on the outside, you know, knowing what the CT525 costs to put in a sprint car, everyone's saying around that like 18 to 19 grand. It's in and it's running. And then you're hearing things about guys spending 25 on a V6 wingless, which is like...
I don't know who's spending 25 on a wingless motor, but maybe people are. I don't know.
And then, another common figure for the wingless motor is 17. So it's like, if guys... But, you know, obviously that's the top guys. Obviously the other guys... Other people are telling me that they spend like a couple of grand on rebuilding one. And it's like, you know, there's obviously those variances.
I don't think anyone's spending a couple of grand these days. Oh, actually, yeah, no, I know of people that probably be about that. A couple of people from Murray Bridge are doing a lot of stuff themselves and still reasonably competitive because at the end of the day, the rules are pretty set. There's certain things you can do and, you know, when you're going from one motor to the next, you're generally, a lot of the parts you are moving with it sort of thing, like the bolt-on stuff. So once you got all that, does change the cost a lot. But if you're going from absolutely ground zero to try and build one, obviously, you probably are looking more towards that 17 mark. But
yeah, because one of the things that I did hear was that there was going to be a crossover period where they were going to let the LS in with the V6s for a period there.
And I've thought about that too. And if you're going to do that, that's fine. But I think you'd have to dramatically open the V6 rules up.
Yeah.
So, like, you'd have to go cams open. I don't know, like, I'm not an engine guru, but you'd probably have to allow porting of some sort, you know.
You're not going to get anywhere near the horsepower level.
Oh, of course not, but you couldn't...
Nowhere near.
Of course not, but you couldn't just run what we have now
and
just run it against that. You couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Like, so I think you're not going to get the horsepower, but you've got to do something to make it... And it's almost a safety aspect, right? Like, you can't just have someone hauling ass in their V8 against... old mate's farting a bottle V6. It's just not going to happen. Like, it's unsafe to do that. Like, like,
so I've got a mate who's got a 400 horsepower V6, like Commodore drag car.
And how much did he spend on it?
Oh, I could almost guarantee you he spent way more than like 20 on it, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, there's nothing left that you can do to it. And it's like, it's right on the ragged edge of making that kind of power too. So, whereas the CT's like, it's 500 out the box.
Yeah.
So
it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's hard for me because, like, I froth on watching, like, USAC. So
awesome.
You're watching, like, the non-wing stuff over there, and it's like, then you see our stuff, and you're like, oh, man, like, what are we doing?
Yeah,
like,
it's been like it for a long time. And, you know, to be honest, it was part of my, you know, a pretty easy decision for me to step away also on, like, for many reasons, but something that did factor in was the fact that the class actually does lack direction. Like, it is what it is now, but no one can tell you where it's going. And, you know, people reference to a boat anchor for a motor. And the reality is that's what they're going to become when it does change. But, you know, how far away is that? Like, you look at AMCAs, for example, they made all those changes to rules, engine rules and whatever. They were a pretty good class before. And now you don't see them. Like, there's very few of them around. And I think there is a risk. Well, probably a lot less risk for wingless to do that sort of move to a 525 because you still got the bones of a sprint car. It's not its own independent class. Yeah. So I think that helps a lot. And I think it'll help bring in, like, the top guys now, most top guys are buying new parts. You know, you probably start having to spend some money on some used parts these days. Like, I think if you went to a V8, you know, there's a bit more cost there, so you might, you know, cut some costs on some used parts or whatever. And I think if they restrict it properly, you could definitely get a lot of life out of them and make a really competitive category out of it. I think that's where wingless failed a bit, even now with the V6 stuff, is there is quite a long way between the bottom and the top in terms of cars now. And you're like, for me, you know, right from the start, they probably should have, it's all good to say in hindsight, like they probably should have made like restrictions on shocks, like, you know, no twin tube shocks, things like that. No tie drive lines, like just keep it steel. no tie internals in the diff. There's so many things you could have done, and it wouldn't affect the racing that much. It would just condense the field a bit more. I think you would have had heaps of different race winners and things like that. Probably would have affected my time in wingless. We had some pretty good equipment. So did the guys we were racing against, but I think it would have brought some of those, those guys that were sort of knocking on the door but not quite there, probably more due to financial backing, that would have brought them more in contention for wins more often.
Yeah.
It's all good in hindsight. And people hate me for saying that because they're like, oh, why do you want to slow it down? The reality is it wouldn't have made it much slower. There's cars out there. If everyone's slower, you wouldn't notice. You just wouldn't have that few cars that are really quick.
Yeah. Probably the only counter argument to that is a guy I was speaking to in New Zealand was saying that the F2 midget series didn't allow any titanium. So then the top guys had nowhere to sell their secondhand stuff to. Their tyre stuff was just sitting around. So they let the F2 go to tyre stuff because then it allowed the top guys to sell gear on with, which is something that Jack spoke about really well, was about the fact of the recycling in Speedway, which is there's sort of nowhere for that stuff to go, and that's what wingless was about, sort of recycling sprint car parts.
But I would say that the internals on the top wingless guys now are better than the average sprint cars. What they're doing to drive lines and rear ends and shit now is they're going as far as you can go with them. Yeah. And I would say most mid-pack to lower sprint cars aren't doing that.
Yeah.
Because they're spending shitloads of money on an engine. You have to give and take. Obviously you're going to prioritise a good donk over a driveline. Yeah. Whereas we don't have that option. So you're spending money on a driveline and that sort of stuff. So, but I know some of the equipment that people are putting in their cars, and it's flash gear. They're not messing around.
Yeah. Do you follow Kyle Cummings from America?
Not closely, no.
No. So he spoke on a really good video. He went wing racing for a while there. He just ditched the non-wing stuff, and he did 12 meetings, and he gave it up because he said the amount of parts that were only lasting that sort of 12 meetings.
Just the load through them.
He said there's stuff that he has that will do more than a season in a non-wing car, even in a 410 non-wing car.
Yeah.
That he just said, nah, it was just, he couldn't believe it. So it's if we do go something that's, LS 500 horsepower, it's are we really going to be tearing up that many more parts and stuff? Obviously consumable stuff like tyres and stuff. But
yeah, I don't reckon the part wear probably changes that much. Yeah, but again, I'm no expert and I've never driven anything like that and never serviced sort of thing. So I know in terms of wear and tear on parts in a wingless, it was next to nothing. Your wear and tear is pretty much things like wheel bearings and things like that. But that happens on anything that rotates. So that's going to happen whether it's got a V8 in it or a V6, whatever. So I don't think that changes that much. It's just, tyre wear. Probably you're going to use a lot more fuel, obviously. I think the smart guys will probably service their engines regularly compared to probably more regularly than what they do a V6.
They are pretty bulletproof, the old V6 though, aren't they?
But we would, we would do 2 shows on the engine oil and drop it, and you're running good stuff in it. And I think, if you're in an 8, you might do... some nights you might just do 1 on it, 2, who knows. But I think the people that are pushing it to 4, 5, 6 shows, you would have to tighten it up a bit. But what's it, $100, $200 a time? It's not that big of a deal. Yeah. Not when you're racing. It's kind of easy to say that, but the average punter doesn't really know that those sorts of costs are involved in. Yeah, it adds up. Yeah. So you spent a bit of time in a speed car as well. Oh, I did 1 show.
I thought you did more than that.
Nah, just this 1 show.
Man, I was stoked when that happened, eh?
Yeah. So, again, Todd Wiesel, he was driving for Daryl Nucky. Couldn't make a race meeting. They had the... it was a night they had... Robbie Fire was still driving the...
East Coast Pipelines car.
Yeah, East Coast Pipelines car. And Domain Ramsey owned a late model. And... did he own the late model? But he owned the speed car, and that was that night he was trying to...
He's trying to do the triple.
Yeah. So, Caden Brown and stuff were over, and for some reason Todd couldn't make it, and Darryl Nucky gave me the call up.
Did he have a wedding or something? You had to go to a wedding or something?
Yeah, something like that. So obviously jumped at the opportunity, and obviously went out in hot laps. It was terrible. Like it was dry and marbly, and the car was real free, and I'm like couldn't drive into the turns. I'm like, oh Jesus, like this is gonna be a lot harder than I thought. So I think like obviously I knew it was gonna be harder, but by the end of the night, we were pretty good. Ran 7th or something, and just I think the last 10 laps of the A main track was just flat out. Like I think it was a 30-lap race, and the last 10 just didn't lift, which was awesome, obviously, but probably wasn't the best racetrack. I think in the second heat, I started out at 2 and had a good little dice with Robert Hurd for the lead for the first 2 laps, and then I made a mistake getting into one and got slid by like 3 guys, and I think I ended up finishing 4th in that heat or something. And I was 7th on points, started 7th in the A. But if I had finished 1 position ahead, I would have been in the dash, like for the top 6 with all the good guys, which would have been pretty unreal. But just missed out.
Was it everything you expected, or like? Because what's that? That's like at least 200 horsepower jump from the wingless. Maybe
yeah, but
more.
I think it's they are a very similar driving style to a wingless. You just got to be. You just have to have the car set earlier, sort of thing. Like you couldn't. Wingless, you're sort of turning as you're approaching the turn. You have to turn the speed car before you get there and have the car set and then flow it through and then obviously try and point the nose and drive off square. Which is, it's very similar to the way you drive a wingless. I think, I thought we were pretty competitive that night. If we jumped straight into a winged car, we'd struggle just with, it's obviously left side down and obviously a huge jump in power.
Yeah.
Just be completely different. But I think a speed car, for most wingless guys, I think be pretty easy to make the transition. And I found them, I was amazed at how good it stuck on the slick. I think that short wheelbase, you can just run it in there and you try and run a wingless in pretty hard on the slick, it's going to try and turn around on you. These things stick. It was, in some ways, in that way it was easy to drive. But yeah, no, it was an awesome night and just cool night to do it because, all the good guys are there, like some of your heroes like Caden Brown and stuff. That's just awesome. You get to race with those guys and, thanks to Daryl Nucky, I got that opportunity and he didn't have to call me. He could have just left the car in the shed that weekend. But yeah, got that one show and that was it. But it was a cool opportunity.
Yeah, obviously the budget jump's huge to go from wingless to...
Yeah, that was obviously the main thing that held us back and... Yeah, it just for me, I couldn't prioritise racing enough to spend that much money on it, especially now. Probably now I'm in more of a financial position to be able to do something like that. But I don't know, I can't prioritise racing that much. And maybe it's just a bit older, change of circumstances with family and stuff. And, I don't want to go speed car racing and, put that detriment on my family. I want my kids to be able to go to a good school and things like that. So I'm sort of forward thinking a bit like that. I had good opportunities when I grew up and I want my lad to have the same. So, yeah. Yeah.
So there's a very high chance he'll race as well.
Yeah, I think so. He still looks out in the shed and says, Daddy's car. And then now he says, Daddy's car gone. He's not real happy about it. So, I think he'll race. Probably start in something like go-karts or something like that. And, if he goes race go-karts, I'll probably race go-karts as well. But, I'm not going to push it onto him, if he doesn't want to race or, whatever he wants to do. It'd be just about giving him the best opportunity to do whatever he wants to do at the top level sort of thing. Yeah. So, we'll see what happens.
So, did you ever have what did you ultimately want to end up racing?
Oh, I think every kid sort of, it's the dream to race sprint cars. Not long after being in wingless, worked out pretty quickly that wasn't going to happen. Had a few people contact me, car owners and stuff, sort of, if you can do this and do that, we'll get you in, sort of thing. Even someone approached me before my 3rd South Australian wingless title win and said, if you can make this happen, win 3 in a row, we'll get you in the car. We'll get you here a practice day, go from there, sort of thing. You get the win and you don't get the call. A lot of people, talk the talk but then don't walk the walk. So I learned pretty quickly that, when people, it's easy to say something, not many people do. So you're sort of no worries, mate. Yeah.
Someone was telling me the other day that someone offered them a drive and they thought, oh yeah, cool. And then as the conversation went on, they had to bring 20 grand with them. And they were like, whoa, hang on, that's not how the phone call started.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. And, I'm probably, I would say, I'm not even 30 yet, but I'm too old to probably say, put in a car now and expect to develop into a good 410 driver. Which I understand that. So like the time's passed me by. I'd be looking, if I was in that position to put someone in a car, I wouldn't be looking at someone who's 30. You'd be looking at someone who's like early 20s. So, and that might be detriment to me to say that, but that's reality. Yeah.
It depends. Like an Australian, no. Like someone of that age. Whereas if you were like potentially looking at like a kid from America who's like
100%.
They've probably done 10 times the amount of racing by the age of like 20.
Yeah.
Compared to what you've probably even done now, sort of thing.
Yeah. It's a different story, different ball game.
Yeah.
But it's all good.
I wouldn't say that you passed racing a 410.
Oh, I don't think we'll ever see that day come, but no, I don't know, if an opportunity comes the way, obviously you jump at it, but it's not something that's going to keep me up at night if I never race one, hopefully one day I do some hot laps in one or something, because I've never actually driven one, like never even steered one, so
yeah, right.
It'd be cool just to drive one around, so I did it, but...
So with the speaker, did you go straight into that meeting as well? You didn't do a practice night, nothing?
Yeah, no practice, nothing, so...
No, so straight into the hot laps for that?
Yeah, and it was terrible in hot laps. Then we had to go qualifying, and it was like straight off from hot laps, and then like my group was pretty much pushing out for qualifying after that, so there wasn't much time for adjustment or anything. It was just like, it's not going to be great, but it is what it is. Like just drive around, get a feel for it, and that's how I treated it. And then started my first heat off the back. They sort of, and they could have maybe started rear all night, but they didn't. So they sort of, I think, dodged up the draw a little bit. So I was off the back in my first one and then on the front in the second one. Went from the back. I think I passed a couple of cars, drove around the right, sort of followed the field. And then, I was sort of in the mix in the second one, but made a mistake and fell back a bit. But no, it was good. It was really good to just jump in, and it was good for my confidence as a driver to be like, I can walk away from that going, I did pretty well. Like I'm not just a wingless driver. Like I can do this as well, sort of thing. And to a lesser extent, like I drove my old man's AM car. They did like a AM car 2020 thing.
Yeah.
That must be like 10 years ago as well. And Michael Miller was in the like first group, because it was like primary drivers, and then non-primary drivers went the first 20 laps of the A main, then the primary drivers went the next 20. And it was like Michael Miller and a heap of other like good guys that had just left AM car, but then like sort of stepped back in. So I was racing with them, and I finished second in our stint, and I never let Dad live this down, but then he went out and backed it up to fourth. I was just like, what are you doing, mate? So no, that was cool. I think anytime you get an opportunity to jump in something different, it's always fun. Like I drove I don't know what they call them now, V6 Sprint.
Like what was the South Australian Lightning Sprint? Yeah.
So I drove one of them. Greg Bell owned it. They had a state title at Whyalla. It was a 2-night deal. Just went up there and finished third in that, but we had a shot at win, and I cooked the tyre and then fell back to third. But yeah,
they're a pretty underrated category themselves.
Yeah, well, I think I'm probably going to upset people saying that. I don't think they do themselves a lot of favours in the presentation of the cars and stuff like that. A lot of them are pretty average sort of equipment, but I guess it's it's not supposed to be an elite category or anything, is it?
Yeah.
But I guess coming from wingless, where I think we've gone a long way past where they are as a category. But I remember like back in the day, I think it was like Brad Keller, I think Matt Eagle,
yeah.
Like they were awesome back then. And I'm sure they were faster then. Whether there was some funky things going on back then, I don't know, but I'm sure they were faster.
They do the same lap times as a 360, believe it or not.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Downforce helps. But I remember, like, obviously, I think it was like probably 6-7 years ago now, Aidan Hall come out with that one that he built, and like he obliterated everyone.
Yeah.
If they were all like that, it would be an awesome class.
Yeah.
And and they're similar. There are a similar car to what they run in like Sydney on the East Coast, like with the I think they call them leader sprints or something like that. They're a similar car, and they put on some good racing, man. Like,
yeah. Well, some of those cars are like, man, they're professionally turned out for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I think, we're over here, it's nowhere near that level. But
yeah. I remember Aidan Hall starting a feature at the Speedway City, and he started I don't know. He was in like turn 3, and everyone else was like up in turn 4 starting the race, and he like left the whole back straight away and still smoked him.
Yeah,
yeah,
it was a quick car.
That was an extremely quick car. I think that's where his lap times, Speedway City or Murray Bridge, was on par with like the qualifying of the Australian 360 title or something like that, which is like pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I remember the person who was telling me, I said at the time, I'd pay good money to see it and get put into a 360 field.
I'd probably get eaten off the start, but then just sort of drive around pretty good with him.
Probably just wind it up,
Yeah.
Have you seen those Hawkeye challenges from America?
Hawkeye challenges? No, I don't think so.
They let everything on the track. So there's like sprint cars.
Like a run what you brung sort of thing.
Yeah,
cool.
street stocks, everything like that. It's just, I don't know, it's wild. Like wouldn't want to be out there in...
Yeah, I think they should do something like that in Australia, but make it permanent. Put bloody late models and supers together or something. I don't know. Too many categories. I'm one of those guys. Too many categories.
Yeah, it's... The late model stuff never kind of got there, did it?
Yeah, well, I think... Yes and no. Like, they're still good in like Western Australia. I think their numbers have dropped off a little bit in Sydney. But up until, COVID and the track change and stuff, they were still pretty solid class over there. I think they'd get 20, 30 every show. That's not that long ago. But I think what held them back locally is, well, we don't have the population and the money here.
Yeah.
So they're probably never going to take off here. Like, there's already big dollar classes around. Like, at the time, people spent big money on supers, and then you had your winged side, so you had the sprint cars. So I can understand why they didn't take off here. We didn't need another big dollar class. Whereas I think in like Perth, supers dropped away pretty quickly. There was still a few, but late models became the predominant class. And Sydney was the same. But I don't know. I don't remember if supers were ever that big in New South Wales. So maybe they sort of had no foundation. I could be wrong, but I don't remember there being too many dominant cars from over there. Queensland, obviously, a different story. They wouldn't have, so supers up there are nuts. They're awesome.
Yeah, and same with mod sedans and stuff like that.
So, there's a few late models up there, but again, never really taken off because they've got supers. And now I think late models are going to find it even harder because the supers, a lot of the competitive supers are running like crate motors. Yeah. So it's brought their cost down heaps, but their racing's just as good and they're going just as fast. So
yeah. See, that's one class that has somehow they allowed the LS to come in and it's there with the big dollar motors already, and it's like cost effective.
There's a significant change in the weight rule if you go to an LS in supers. So I think it drops out 100 kilos or something crazy like that. So
just going to the LS motor.
Yeah, because they try and offset the reduction in power by lightening up the cars a fair bit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I think that's how they've done it.
Yeah, interesting.
Something along those lines.
I haven't heard that one, but I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
It's something like that.
Yeah,
I'm sure of it.
Yeah, even Matt was saying Perth's sort of a different. It's a whole different ball game over there too, with the money from top to bottom. He said the same amount of money is in wingless over there as it is with the sprint cars. Everyone over there's got money. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's nuts. But I think as we talked off air before, with the promotion and stuff, that it's so well promoted over there. There's always bums on seats. You get professional. There's so much professional branding involved, and there's eyes on it. There's people paying attention. So people are investing their own money, but they're also getting a lot of investment from other people.
Yeah,
and I think we lack that a fair bit here, locally, and yeah, probably in a lot of areas in Speedway in Australia they lack it. Darwin is doing well at the moment with the promoters up there, and they've got a good deal with Seven and stuff. And that's what probably needs to happen nationally, sort of thing. Obviously Perth are kicking goals, they're going really well. I think Toowoomba in Queensland with under Ryan Harris, he's doing super well up there. But there's probably not a lot to highlight in between. Obviously you got Premier, which is it almost promotes itself now. It's got that much history, Not to say they're not doing a good job, but
that's where it can drop away too, though.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. So, if you think you've got it, it's if you don't stick to it, and then it's.
So I don't know how many tracks there is in the country, but I would you can probably there's a handful of them that you would say are promoted well.
Yeah.
Well enough to help the sport to the next level sort of thing, I guess.
Yeah. I actually had a thought the other day. When was the last time you seen an advert on TV for it?
Oh, 100%.
Like, do you remember those like crazy, like, I think Wade obviously did the voiceover for him, though, the crazy Speedway City adverts. Like, I haven't seen anything like that for years now.
So you don't see anything like that, and, you know, we spoke earlier, you know, the Velo 500 this year, there's no Speedway Australia set up there, nothing like that. There used to always be a Speedway display. It was in a good spot, heaps of people walking past, heaps of people asking questions, like... You know, there's none of that now. You know, they had the Motorsport Expo. Like, there was no Speedway there. It was like, what are we doing? Like, you know, are we trying to put ourselves in a hole? Like, that's what it seems like.
Yeah. We're sort of our own worst enemy.
100%. But, you know, people like yourself doing things like this, we could... Sprint Car Hub, you know, that stuff all helps. You know, people, like, promoting themselves, I guess, helps. But... You know, it seems like a lot of effort goes from the drivers to try and promote themselves, you know, present good cars. You know, there's not many people getting around in, like, daggy old race suits anymore. Everyone, like, you know, gets the flash kit, you know, wrapped helmets, all sorts of stuff. Some people even go to the point of, like, do a bit of, like, interview training and stuff so they know what to say when they ask questions. You know, so drivers are putting in a lot of effort to try and elevate the sport. But I feel like there's a lot of gaps. You know, promoters, if we're going to call them, and Speedway Australia as a body, probably could do more to help promote the sport.
Yeah.
I might get a slap on the wrist, but it's...
Yeah, it's such a weird thing. Like, for me, like, I know someone like yourself or, like, you know, definitely your old man, if I was just some regular punter walking through the pits, I could easily walk up to you guys and near on have this conversation now, or I could... walk up to you and be like, hey, mate, how do I get into one of these? What do I got to do? And you'll tell me.
100%. And it's because, you know, it's a love of the sport.
Yeah.
Like,
but you won't see that in any other category.
No.
Like, good luck getting that close to the car in V8 supercars or anything like that to start with.
So, you know, it's a huge opportunity for us, but we don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're on that side of the fence and you stay there. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's a backwards way of thinking, I think. Like, yeah, you got to... We don't interact with the fans anymore now, probably less than what we used to, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I remember back in the day, like Speedway City, it was called then, you know, in track intervals and stuff, they'd have like, there'd be promotions from Coke or like lollies, like they'd be throwing out lolly bags and stuff, and all the kids running around trying to get like, so there's all that interaction.
A bunch of drivers would come out and
start
things
like that. Like,
and like, I don't know how that happened. Like, you know, did Wendy go and drag them all out by the ear or something like that? And
who knows? But
you know,
I think...
Doesn't matter.
I think if you know, come up with a plan and, you know, said to the drivers, like, this is what we want to do, you would have a hard time finding people that aren't on board with that. Yeah. Because everyone understands, like...
Well, drivers would come out with their, like, hero cards and stuff 100%, like that.
Like,
you know?
It's not just promotion of Speedway, it's promotion of someone's personal brand. Like,
you
know, that little thing can be the difference of, you know, a sponsor or not, sort of thing, you know? But those opportunities are gone, like... Oh, you know, maybe we could do more ourselves to organise that, but, you know, we're so focused on our own program. Like, you can't push the boundaries in every way. Like, the promoters are there to promote, but they're not really promoters. They're just managing a speedway. Yeah.
So one of the people that I like fully look up to in terms of like promoting is Peter Murphy, and like what he's doing in California is like he's just kicking goals.
100%. And you see like the backing, you know, Peter Murphy Classic and things like that get, and it's just because, they're promoting. Like that's what they're paid to do. Like
it's the small things for me that like the guy who, you know, probably not the heats, but I know the dash or something like that. The meeting gets put on pause kind of thing, which we all hate. But for, you know, a couple of minutes, it's like the driver pulls up on the front straight, walks across the track, and comes into the crowd for the interview. And then they're throwing out bags of lollies and, you know, and stupid things like they win the 10 pounds of bacon.
Yeah. Well, who wouldn't?
So they get £5 for themselves and they give £5 to someone in the crowd. But
I'll be showing up for that.
You see all the little kids looking at it like, oh, this is what Justin Sanders looks like. Yeah. You know, so how many people know what the driver actually looks like?
100%. And I think that was, you know, the promotions group that, you know, did the whole USC thing to start with. And, you know, all those banners and put people's faces on banners. And, like, that was like the, you know, for me, that was probably one of the most exciting times in Speedway in South Australia.
Definitely.
It really felt like we were heading like in a direction like this is going to get somewhere. It's going to be really good. And, you know, it started to fade a bit, you know, I think 2 years in, and then that was sort of almost done, and then COVID really put the nail in the coffin sort of thing. But even, again, on the promotion side, you look at, say, World Series sprint cars, they're like, oh, we can't do it with COVID, whatever. Like, well, and I think they're going to have a crack again this season.
It's back this year.
But, like, why did it have to happen like that? Why it took so long? Like, every other national motorsport category, like, they just played on. They just did it.
Yeah.
And
New Zealand race without crowds.
Well, yeah, we can race without crowds, but also most of those people that are going to do World Series, they're travelling anyway.
Yeah.
So, like, and that was something that was promoted, and people went to World Series. Like, it was like some people they put it on the calendar. Like, that's what they did every year.
I don't understand. People are calling for a name change, and I'm like, what? Like, that name's been around for so long.
I don't know.
We've bitched and moaned that it hasn't happened, and now you want to call it something else. Like, I could guarantee you that there was people that didn't go to any other meeting at Speedway City except for the 2 World Series events that come there a year.
100%.
Because it was like, oh, it's World Series.
Yeah,
like,
and now promoters wonder where their money's gone. It's
yeah.
not coming through the gate because you're not promoting it, mate.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty obvious.
It's a weird thing. And that's where, like, I think we're definitely on the downhill slide of Speedway.
Yeah, I do have like a bit concerned that it will fall in a hole, but can only hope that it doesn't happen. I think, you know, with the economic climate stuff changing at the moment, I think that's going to hit a lot of people probably harder than what we realise at this stage. I think it's still coming. And I think, you know, particularly areas like, you know, in South Australia, all our tracks are rural. And it's always the rural places that cop it harder than anywhere else when financial stuff happens. So that is a worry, but, you know, hopefully some people start paying attention and realise they need to promote. Give someone, like, you're trying to sell a product, but make that product something that's worth selling.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I'm all for format changes and things like that, you know. I'm not a fastest to the rear guy like they are in mod lights. Like, my old man just pushes that like crazy. But, you know, an inversion, like, do something. Like,
yeah.
No one wants to see the same guy just drive off the front around for 20 laps. Like,
yeah. James McFadden touched on an interview the other day because that Huset's 250 grand race was a different format for World of Outlaws.
Yeah.
And people were cracking the shits. And James actually said, he's like, don't forget, first and foremost, we're an entertainment product. That's what, you know, as much as he's a racer through and through, that's not the forefront of what the whole thing is about. The whole thing is entertainment and or an event.
Well, that's it. You can't sell a product if you don't have a product. So, yeah, if it's not an entertainment product, then who's buying it? You're not going to. Like,
it's only the diehards.
Exactly, and it's getting harder and harder to get new fans too, because, you know, people have, you know, I think we're all creatures of habit, all set in our ways. It's hard to get people to go and do something different. Like, I've got friends that have, like, they're reasonably good friends of mine, and, you know, people I work with, and I've raced for 18, 19 years, and they've always said, oh, I want to come watch. But then, like, they get the opportunity to, and they're like, oh, I've got this on and that on. So they don't prioritise it because it's not something they've ever done before. They're like, I'll get to it eventually, sort of thing. It's like, I want to see it, but it's not like a be all and end all for me.
Yeah.
But then, like, a couple of them, you get them there, and then they're like, oh, this is awesome. But it's like, you have to, you know, we're trying to just get our couple of friends to go. Like, if you can get the, you know, call it a business to promote itself by the promoters promoting, you'd get those few people from all sort of different walks of life. And obviously it becomes a lot bigger.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're a long way off yet.
Yeah. That's Caleb Curry touched on it with Auckland, that they get just like regular punters just rocking up. Like, not necessarily like diehard racing fans, but just like people go there with the family because, like, this is the event that's happening Saturday night.
Yeah.
Like, and we've totally lost that form of crowd in Australia.
Well, it seems that, like, you know, I remember probably
10
years ago I was having a conversation with someone that's saying, like, oh, it gets harder now because there's so many different entertainment options. Like, on a Saturday night or whatever, like, back in the day they had nothing else to go to. I'm like, yeah, but this is motorsport and race cars are awesome. Like, and when people actually go there, they love it. Like, you don't have many people that leave a speedway that have been there for the first time or there one time a year. They go home, like, enjoying it. Like, it's not like, you know, how many footy games can you go to and it'd be boring? Like, I don't get it. Like,
And they reward missing, so
yeah,
that's my biggest thing. I hate AFL with a passion, and it's like a sport that you miss and you still get rewarded. Is like, yeah, I find it so hard to try and bring like motorsport fans like into speedway. Like the amount of entertainment that you can see across many categories in one night, like in the one place, like, you know, like, do you ever go to Clipsal before? Do you ever?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I had grandstand tickets there, right? And you look at the big screen, you watch the cars come past, and you look at the big screen.
100%. And
And
that's
it's
what
like-
most people that you say that you can eventually drag there, they're like, oh, you can see the whole thing. This is
Yeah.
awesome. Like, you don't miss anything. I'm like, yeah, like 100%. I've been trying to tell you this. Like,
Yeah, it's a hard thing to try and, you know, get them into the mindset that we're not just hillbillies like pissing on the hill.
100%.
It's
yeah.
like there's an extremely, not all classes, you know, I'll give you that, but
Yeah.
there's an extremely professional side to speedway too.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I don't know how you change people's perception other than trying to get them there. Yeah, and this whole thing of like, you know, Speedway's got to go user pay and stuff like that. I agree with that, but give like the promoters have to give something as well. Like, we're not asking for, you know, I'm a wingless driver. I'm a support category driver basically. I'm not asking you to give me 10 grand to win at a club show.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking. I couldn't give a rat's ass to give me $100. Like, I don't care. But promote us. Like, do something to help Speedway grow. Like, instead of just, you know, a weekend. It's like a weekly routine. Go there, pay your money. They let you do your laps, and then you go home. It's almost like nothing in between. There's no excitement around it. There's no build up. There's nothing. Like,
Yeah.
And I think we lack that.
And then I made the comment on Facebook the other night. The 60 lapper is the same night as the Victorian title in Portland.
Oh, perfect.
Like, I don't understand.
I'm not surprised, but
Like, how can that? I don't understand.
yeah, we'll see.
And that's not to say that every
Yeah.
single car that's at both events would have gone to the other, or which, you know, whatever.
Definitely doesn't help either event though, does it?
No.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, obviously there's multiple parties involved in that. There's the two tracks and then the two state clubs as
Yeah.
well. And typically, it's a lot of states don't work well together,
Yeah.
and then the tracks are worse than the states working together. So yeah, I can see how that happens, but it's stupid. There's been years like, so for example, last year, the last couple of years, South Australia Wingless doesn't program anything around the first weekend of January based on the SummerSlam thing.
Yeah.
And that was sort of just like
A given.
yeah, it was just like a given. Like, you just don't do that because, you know, everyone wants to go to race SummerSlam. So it's like, no worries, like, just do that. And then obviously, like last year, all the South Australian cars get told 2 days out, you're not welcome. So I think that's probably going to change things a bit on how things are programmed. Like, you know, it was a one-way street. We're trying to look after them a bit, and there was no sort of return serve, I guess. So, yeah, I guess that happens.
Yeah. And then are you hearing stuff too about tracks don't want winglesses anymore because so many of them rock up?
Oh, look, I can understand it. I can understand at times it doesn't help, but I can also, you know, you could argue that there's a lot of race meetings that probably won't go ahead without wingless. Like, you know,
I'm just thinking the money through the back gate. Like,
Yeah.
a driver, 3-4 crew minimum is like
yeah,
a lot of money coming in there.
I don't know. I don't see the logic behind it, but I don't know. I guess promoters maybe do. I don't know. Who's going to pack the track if wingless aren't there?
Yeah. You know, and then I've heard the argument too that it's because of the kind of racing that they put on too, and that's, you know, and then that's obviously brought up the engine thing again, and it's like you just go around in circles.
Yeah, but in that, like, you look at most programs, you could argue, like, wingless can put on wicked racing, given the right conditions and the right opportunity. But 90% of the time,
that's every class though.
yeah, but 90% of the time, this is what happens to wingless. You go there, you pack the track, and then you go get parked out the back until the track's completely and worn out. Like, it's just done. So you get out there and you're on a one-lane slick track. Then the next lot of heats will go. You'll be the next. So you'll be the last of the second round. They'll normally rip it before you go out there, and then it'll be flat out, one line flat out. So you've gone from slick one line to flat out one line. And then the finals will start, and you'll be the last final when the track's routed again.
Yeah.
Like, and that's how it goes. And it's pretty much anywhere in the country, that's what happens to wingless. You're never on a really favourable track, I wouldn't say, or very rarely. You know, and when I think the best wingless aim main, say at Murray Bridge for the last 3 years, is when the wingless A-mains before the sprint car A-main, because there's a bit to work with in the track and whatever. It's not completely worn out. But then, like, you know, it makes sense to program sprint cars so people want to stay there and watch it. They don't, you know, they're not there to watch wingless, but wingless can put on good racing too, given the right conditions. As you said, any category can, but yeah, I think the lack of respect for wingless in general, like, doesn't help the class produce good racing, because you're like, oh, it's just wingless, so they can just go here.
Yeah.
Like, but if you
A place of passion though, like it's,
yeah,
you know, and I'm not saying that I want to have a crack at promoting. There's a part of me that I do, but I also don't know the ins and outs of it either. Like,
yeah, I think it's like anything.
There's weird things that scare me about promoting, right? Like, how the hell do you run the canteen? Like, do you know what I mean? But it's something that's so important to the race night.
Yeah, you can't run out of pies.
That's right. And it's like, how do you prevent that from happening? Or like, fuck, how many do you order? Do you over order them?
Yeah.
Like, do you know, and then you burn money. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's things to promoting too that, you know, you got no clue on either.
I think it's like anything though. If you're a lead promoter sort of thing, it's about putting the right people in the right places to help make things happen. And I'm sure they all do that. Like, you know, take, you know, Ryan Harris from Toowoomba, for example. He wouldn't know what's going on in the canteen all night, would he? Like, he'd be assisting, you know, when he could or whatever, like, you know, helping during the week, but he's not going to know the ins and outs of that stuff. And, you know, he's not probably telling the flag marshal what flags they need to bring or whatever. Like, yeah, like, you know, you put the right people in the right place. He's not telling the chief steward everything, you know. You just go put the right people in the right places. Same with any business, any way you run something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I do want to have a. When I say I do, like, I won't, but yeah, I wouldn't mind having a.
Never say never.
Just, well, you know, like, you know, being honest, I have done and probably will do forever, rag on promoters, but, you know, sort of maybe walk in their shoes and see what it's like to a degree too.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know if they're called promoters. But
yeah, it's, well,
I think they used to be, but not so much.
Yeah, I actually have a. I don't know. I want to say it.
How much do you value your license?
No, not that. No, it'd be fine. That it'd just be the comment section would just blow up. There's a promoter that I actually think was doing a very good job that's not promoting anymore. So
South Australia? Or?
It might have been South Australia. I don't know. Like, it might have been. Who knows? I don't want to say.
I actually think of a couple that I think were doing all right, but aren't anymore. But
yeah. I just, yeah.
One of them just...
I've said it and people have just, in person, have just lost their mind at me, but...
One person who's just recently been employed by another motorsport body.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about because I've seen that blow up on socials as well.
Yeah, so he actually had some good ideas. And yeah, some not so good. But I think, you know, given some more time.
Moving forward from here with your career?
Yeah, I don't know. So just be chilling for a while. I'll race a few times next year. Because yeah, I'm not retired. So I'll race a few times next year for Duncan Evans in one of their cars. That'll just be, you know, to scratch an itch sort of thing. Not super competitive, but having said that, I think we're going to do like the state title and possibly the Oz title in Sydney. And if I need to do another race just to qualify, because you got like a 3-race deal, we'll probably do that. But that's just, you know, more because they're cool events and it's just something to be a part of. And yeah, got an opportunity there, so why not do it? So, and then when I'm not racing, I'll just be helping Caleb and Lockie develop as drivers. Caleb's like a sponge. He's a really good listener and really wants to learn. And obviously Duncan wants to give them the best opportunity to succeed. So he's asked me to come help out, and they helped me a lot through my racing career. So of course said yes, and look forward to it. Should be good fun.
So we'll still see you around the traps then?
Yeah, I'll be around plenty. Probably more than I want to be. Probably more than my wife wants me to be. But nah, it'll be good. Still, obviously, there's still a passion for the sport there. So, you know, I'll try and get something out of it while it's still an option. So, yeah, I'll be around.
All right, easy done. Thanks, Joel.
Cheers, mate.
We'll see you around.
Cheers.